Good evening. So I think I've got my mic fixed this week. So super excited about that. Gonna figure out how to turn off this music here. There we go. Uh, so welcome to our Friday night data chats. Super excited to be here this evening. I hope you all had a great week. Looking forward to talking to everybody. Tonight, we're going to talk a bit about our October coding challenge, kind of what it was. We'll walk through what the code challenge was, walk through, you know, since I didn't get very many people submit their responses, I'll walk through kind of what the code challenge was and what one of the examples of what one of the solutions may have been. So that was one of the comments from last week is since we didn't get a whole lot of feedback, then go ahead and walk through a live example of what the solution may have been. So tonight I'm going to do that. We're going to walk through what the code challenge was, walk through what the solution would be, and along the way, answer any questions that anybody may have on data engineering. Just drop them down in the chat. And we're going to be using Azure Data Studio tonight to do some querying. I'm going to show you how to import the data into a database, show you where the code challenge is on the website, and walk through how to kind of model out that data, how to split it up into dimensions and facts, and how to efficiently write some aggregation queries at this type of scale. There's about 1 million records in here, and so it'll be important to make your queries efficient. So, like I said, any comments, any questions, drop them in the chat. Happy to answer anything along the way. Let me know if you have any suggestions on a function to use or a method to use to model the data or to write the query, and I'll see if and we'll discuss it and we can implement it. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen here. We'll walk through kind of what the code challenge was for October real quick. So October code challenge, we're going to transform this one big table into efficient models and queries. So a lot of times when you're pulling data from various sources, especially from transactional databases, you may get it as one big table. It may just be one big table, and you may need to, or even APIs, right? You may get the data as one large data set, and you'll need to split it up into an effective model so that it will scale efficiently, so that when you're doing analytics, then your queries and your reports will run quickly. Keeping in mind that you have OLTP databases, which are transactional, which are your ERP databases, your manufacturing databases, your finance databases, and then you have your OLAP databases and your data warehouses that are structured and formatted for efficient analysis. Transactional databases are formatted and structured for efficient write operations. So things like adding new records to tables, updating records and tables, things like that. So, you could read this. This is on our Gambill Data Engineering page. So it's just gambledataengineering.com. The monthly code challenges, October code challenge. I'm going to drop this link in the chat for anybody that may want to check that out. When you go to that link, if you haven't registered yet, we have our Gambill Data Sphere. And so what that gives you access to are the data snippets for all the data for the code challenges, along with I am going to get to start putting out the code snippets for the various tutorials that I do out on this site as well. And then it also has a link as well as on the YouTube page to get to our our Discord channel. So Again, this month we're deep diving into SQL optimization and schema design with a real world task that will challenge your skills in creating efficient data models and queries. Um, Again, this is something that is a common data engineering task. You identified a data source, you need to start pulling it in, you need to break it up uh, into a model that is going to be efficient for your report developers, for your BI, your analysts, and for your data scientists. Um, so in this case, I created this data set called One Big Sales Table. So again, one of the modeling uh, methodologies is one big table. In some cases, there's some companies that's what they follow is just having everything in one big table. Uh, Depending on the use case, that's not always the most efficient. So it's important to model things out to be efficient for um, your specific data set and your specific use case. So the task this month was to obviously download the data, load it. There again, there's 1 million records in this data set. Load it into your database of choice. Tonight we're going to be using uh, on-premise SQL Server, but it would be similar to do it into an Azure SQL Server. Um, Break down the data set into dimensions and fact tables, and then write some optimized queries that will aggregate the data at various levels. Again, all very common data engineering tasks that you have to perform really on a daily basis as a data engineer. Um, so we're going to be looking for totals by customer, product, region, time, um, and then again, these are code challenges that I put out there for you all to go out, look at, to practice with, and to submit. Once you submit them, I will personally go in and evaluate your results and provide any feedback on different ways you may have thought of things. If you had an awesome solution, then I will spotlight it on one of these on one of these live chats. So again, important for performance and accuracy. Uh, and then again, I put bonus points in here for creating a visualization in Power BI or Looker or Tableau, which are visualization tools that you can create reporting that's very dynamic and robust reporting that you could get out to your stakeholders. Um, And then, there's some directions in here on how to join the challenge, become a member of the Gamble Data Sphere, download the one big, hey, Gene, what's up? Um, and, uh, and then once you crack your challenges, then you send your solutions to me. You don't have to send the data, but, just send, your SQL queries and like I said, I'll review them. And then, yeah, this particular, um, challenge, it was building upon all of various of the previous trainings that we've done. So we we'll be talking about window functions. We'll be talking about again how to model. We'll be talking about how to import data, um, and so how to adjust um, your data types, things like that. So again, as I go through this, pop your questions, pop your suggestions in the chat, and we're gonna get into it. And then I put a little funny thing in here. May the odds ever be in your favor. So start with showing you how to download the data. You just click on the one big sales table. It's going to download that file. We're going to not put it in my thumbnails file because that doesn't make sense. We're going to go here, and I've got a file set up for data sets. We're going to drop it here. We're just going to save. And it's just a CSV file, not anything super complex or anything, just a CSV file. So that's that. Easy as that. So if I drag this over here, is it going to show that? No, I need to reshare. So I'm going to share Here, maybe if I share the entire screen, that'll be easier. Okay. So this, for those of you that may not be familiar with it, this is Azure Data Studio. Some of you may use SSMS, which is SQL Server Management Studio. Uh, both tools are equally fine. Azure Data Studio is a little bit newer. SSMS has been around for uh, an eternity, as long as I've been doing this work. Um, I remember using SSMS in the early 2000s. So SSMS has been around forever. Azure Data Studio, or ADS, is has not been around as long, but also very robust. I like ADS because it is newer, because it does have some additional functionality. You can create notebooks in here. You could write Python scripts in here. So super cool. Again, still a free tool. Uh, so if you don't have it and you are using SSMS, then this might be an option for you to kind of look into as well. Like I said, you create notebooks, which means that you could write Python. There's different extensions that you could add to it. A ton of extensions in the marketplace that you could add to it. Um, Azure CLI extensions, migration extensions, even extensions on like adding and removing columns from tables so that you don't have to actually write out your alter statements. Um, lots of cool functions, cool extensions in here. GitHub Copilot, lots of different things. So again, we're going to use the SQL Server. So this is one way that you could do it, right? There is an extension that you have to download in order to manually import data using Azure Data Studio. With SSMS, it just comes as part of it. You just can right click and import data, and it's there. In SSMS, you have to install the I think it's this here. Probably it's the SQL Server import extension, so that you could do it. But come back up here. We're gonna just right click on the server that I'm using, and we are going to import wizard. Again, this is a super simple way to do it, right? Generally, this is not, as a data engineer, this is not the way that you're going to do it. But I wanted to show you that this is one path that you can take. Generally, as a data engineer, you'll either be using Azure Data Studio, or you could use, to create a pipeline. Not Azure Data Studio. Sorry, Azure. You could use Azure Synapse, and I'll go through the Synapse example as well. You'd use Synapse or ADF to import data into your SQL Server. In this case, you could just import it directly. If it's a one-time import, maybe this is your quick and dirty solution, right? Sometimes quick and dirty solutions are what you got and what you need to use. So location of the file, we're gonna hit browse. We're going to go to my data sets and one big sales table. We could leave it named that. I'm going to import it into my staging schema. And again, generally, this is a good point. Generally, when you're importing data, especially new data, you'll import it into a staging area. First time imports, incremental imports, you'll put into a staging table, and then you'll move that data from the staging table into your production or your foundation tables. So next, then it kind of gives you a preview of the data, lays it out for you so you can kind of look at it and see it. You see there's not a ton of columns here, but again, there's a million records, so decent size. You could even create additional columns here. You create a derived column. So if you need to create a calculated column, or you want to add a, add some other columns to this, then you can do that. We're not going to tonight. Again, we're importing this data directly into a staging table. So we're going to import it as is. We're going to go next. Now, here's where a couple people got hung up this month. You have to pay attention to what it's importing here and the data types. Sometimes these data types, it SQL Server wants to make an assumption based on like the first 50, 100 records of what the data types are. Sometimes it gets it wrong, right? Sometimes you're going to have to adjust. Generally, I won't stick with a small int, just because you don't know if it's really gonna. It's small int. There's just not a whole lot of space there. I would always change these to ints. Would be my recommendation. So we'll kind of go through there. Customer name, 50 characters feels small for a customer name, right? So let's change that to 250 characters because this is a literal, with the nvar car, this is a literal number of characters. So it's not like a number of bytes or anything. This is a literal number of 250 characters. Let's change this tiny int to regular int. Come on. I could hit the right solution. Again, product name, I don't, even if your initial data set has something like product name in it and it's currently set at 50 characters and you see them all currently at 50 characters or less, do you really trust that eternally going forward that all the products coming into that table are going to stay at 50 characters or less? Or is there a possibility that that's going to grow? Product name feels like something that can be a couple hundred characters or at least 150 characters. So let's change this to 150. Yeah, so my point is, as you're doing this, this is creating a table in your staging schema. Um, and think future forward. Think of what um, what this table might grow into. Again, if you have questions about what I'm saying or uh, different suggestions, be sure to put them in the chat. Happy to discuss that with you, and maybe change how I think of things. Um, so again, category name, anything that has a name in it, 50 characters feels small, right? So I would expand those. Um, and then, like I said, anything that's small int, tiny int, uh, I don't like those. We'll change those. Unit price, we could leave them at float. Float is okay, but there are a couple of different options here, right? You can use numeric, or you could use int and define the precision for that. So we could do int. I like numeric, but we could do int and do 10 comma 2. So what that says is that it could have 10 digits and up to do 2 decimal places. These are prices, so 2 decimal places should work for us, not 20. So we're just going to copy and paste that down to here. Now we could tell it which one of these are the primary keys. These are important things to consider as you're importing the data, because a lot of times you'll be importing this data into that table, and you could set these for a staging table. I don't know that you care about the primary key so much. Definitely as you move it into, hey Kumar, um, definitely as you move it into the your production table, you're going to make sure that you have um, defined your primary keys, depending on the database that you're using. In some cases, primary keys may or may not matter in some databases. That's how it is. But even if in those databases, you're going to want to um, define whether or not nulls are accepted, whether or not that needs to be unique, things like that. So again, we could allow nulls or not allow nulls. We'll go ahead and allow nulls for everything. Let's go ahead and set the primary key just to show you that it's going to do that. Our line item ID is our primary key in this table. And then we could hit import data. And it might give you some errors here. We've got a parameter or variable. Unit price has an invalid data type. So let's go back here and change this to, oh yeah, it's got to be decimal. We'll do decimal 10.2. sure, but decimal 10.2, import data, and successfully inserted the data into the table. So pretty straightforward, pretty quick to do it this way. Hit done. We'll see that now here and here in staging, we probably have to refresh. In staging, now we have OBT sales data. And we could right click and hit select top 1000 here. When you do that, same function, there's same function in SSMS. Why would you allow nulls on certain data types? That's a great question, Gene. So in some cases, uh, generally you wouldn't allow nulls on everything, right? So let's look real quickly at the definition of this table. So we have line item ID, invoice ID. These are probably not ever going to be null, right? There are some things though, where you might have some null data. Like you may get a new product that hasn't been assigned a category name yet, or for some reason didn't get a category when it was created, and so the category name might be null when it comes through. At least you see that sometimes in sales. Sometimes product groups get really excited about a certain product that they're launching. They get it launched so that salespeople could start selling it, start putting it on invoices and putting it on opportunities and deals. And it doesn't get built out fully in the system. And so that data might come through as null. And so you still want to track that data. You still want to have that data. But it might be null for a little bit. And it might be something that you have to anticipate that you may need to go back and update later, with a category name, for example. So that comes through sometimes. Sometimes you get a new store and it hasn't been built out fully in the system for some reason, and a region may come through as null. Some of these things, you may want to leave as not null, right? And not allow nulls in them, because you want to be alerted that, hey, this didn't get assigned a region. Keeping in mind that when that happens, you're keeping the rest of the data from flowing. And so keep that, balance your data integrity and your data cleaning with availability of reporting. Sometimes the business still needs the rest of their reporting if a piece of data is missing. And sometimes as new products or as new locations get built out, real in the real world, sometimes that data is null for a week or two or even a month until that store or that product gets fully built out in the system. Um, so those are some reasons why you may allow nulls in certain fields. Um, and again, you don't want your whole reporting structure, your whole data structure, and pipeline to stop because the product category is not there yet. Great question, Gene. Thanks. So this is kind of the definition of the table. So again, you could get to that in here by right clicking and doing design, and it'll bring up this. This is something that's not in SSMS. This is something that is specific to Azure Data Studio. You also have these script as create, script as drop. There are similar functions to that in Azure Data in SSMS, but it's kind of branched out in the selection. Cool. So again, you see the data comes through here. So we've got our data. So I do also want to walk through in Synapse. We're going to walk through in Synapse how to import this data as well from Synapse into your database. So let's bounce over to Synapse here. So this is going to be Azure Synapse Analytics. I did a video earlier this week on how to create dynamic data sets and dynamic link services, which is something that was important to me. Uh, in the wrong portal. Which was something important to me when I first learned it a few years back, because I had um, inherited a a Synapse resource that had, I mean, it had like 50 different link services. Each of those link services had 10 plus, uh, data sets, and it was just massive. It was a lot to manage. Every time, the way it was set up, every time something had changed, you had to go through and change like, all the link services, several of the data sets in order to get everything to flow through. And so, using key vaults, using, uh, parameters, and making things flexible, you could make it to where you're just having to update a few things. If like a key rotates, right, then you only have one place to go through and replace that key. When that key rotates, you put it in your key vault, and it makes things more efficient. From a manageability standpoint, it makes it more complex from a teaching somebody, onboarding somebody into your system standpoint, but from a manageability standpoint, oh, I think I suspended. Um, hmm, well, clearly I'm having an issue. And this is good to be able to troubleshoot. View my access here. I'm the owner. Let me clear my cache and start over here. Boom, boom, boom. This happens sometimes, especially if you have multiple um, Azure accounts. Sometimes it gets stuck on a certain account and you have to clear your cache and close out and go back in. So again, good lesson to learn. Sometimes you have to troubleshoot some access issues uh, as you're going through things. And so this, for those of you that haven't seen it, this is the Azure portal. Uh, Gene, feel free to. I know you've got your cert, so feel free to jump in if you see anything that I'm doing wrong and getting in here, uh, or help me troubleshoot. So I was just in here, obviously, to do that other training. Um, I actually didn't say I did link a key vault into here, but it's like I don't have access. Hmm, I don't know. I'll have to play with it. was just in here the other night. Hmm. Maybe it's that. Shouldn't have been. Still have it open. Well, I don't think it's one of my. Sign out. Yeah, let me. Yeah. I mean, it's just an authentication error. It's a 403. So it's, I mean, it's clearly. I don't have authentication. I don't have rights for some reason. But when I come here, it shows that I'm the owner. Ooh. I was playing with stuff the other day and I'd moved the subscription to a different directory. And I bet that's what my issue is. Default, understand, change. Okay, well, while we're waiting for that to switch back to the other directory, let's go back to our data set. Once it'll take hey, yeah, that may have helped too. But I think it's because I was trying to create a B2C Entra subscription, and I moved the subscription to the other tenant, and I think that screwed things up. So it happens. Okay, so let's talk about this data set real quick, and how might you um, model this data out? So there's a bunch of different things here. We talked a little bit about some of them a moment ago, with the product IDs and the product names and category names. So for those of you that don't know, one of the very popular um, schema designs is called star schema. And star schema says that you do your modeling as fact tables and dimension tables. So dimension tables are like attributes. They are things like customer names, addresses, product names, product categories. Um, Even you often will see a dimension as a date. You'll have a date dimension, and so those are things that you'll see as um, as part of the snowflake schema. Um, so in this case, it came through as one big table, right? And so we want to split this up into some different tables. So we want to split it up into a fact table that would be our invoices. And then we want to split it up probably into a customer table. That's our customer IDs and our customer names. And then also we'll split it up into, there's a couple different directions you may go with this last piece, but um, probably split it up into a product table, and we'll put in the product ID, product name, category ID, and category name. Or, there's another modeling technique called snowflake schema, which takes attribute tables, takes those dimensions, and breaks them up a little bit further. Um, so instead of your fact table just relating to one dimension table, one attribute table, that attribute table will relate to another attribute table. So for this case, we may break it up into a product table and a category table. So that product table will relate to that category table because these are the product categories. Um, or you may do it all in one. It's completely up to you and how you want to associate this data, right? You know, you balance out complexity with efficiency, and keeping in mind that the more tables you break it out into, if this is how your data is coming in, that means that's more write operations that you have to do as you're ingesting new data. So keeping those things in mind as you're going through how you're thinking about and how you're planning on doing this modeling. Modeling is not something that you look at something and instantly you may get to that point where you're that good that you look at a data set and instantly how you're going to model that out. You know, there's plenty of, good use case for getting out a, paper and pen, or, looking at, going up to a whiteboard or a dry erase board and literally handwriting it out. Or there are tools out there, uh, ERWin is a great tool for a entity diagram. So ER is just entity relationship, and so you could create diagrams in those tools. And there are plenty of tools out there where you can model out your data before you physically do it. But all that to say, we're looking at the data here. Let's go ahead and create a couple of tables. So, like I said, definitely one we want to create is our customer table, right? So let's create table. Let's create a schema. So this is something you'll want to do as you're thinking about, again, you have to plan out when you're doing this modeling, how you're going to do it, where you're going to put it, how it's going to process, how it's going to flow, even down to what that final piece is going to look like when you're handing it off to your analysts. How is that going to look like to them? How do they need it to look? What other fields do they maybe need that you need to augment that data from other data sources that you may have? So let's create a schema for this new data set, and we'll call it just October Code Challenge. Let's just call it, Code Challenge. But you name it whatever you want. The reality is that you'll probably name it by different kind of groups in your organization. You may have a finance schema, you may have an HR schema, you may have a sales schema, marketing schema. And so that way you're kind of breaking things up by domain within your business. So we're going to create a schema called October Code Challenge. We're going to create a table called October Code Challenge dot customer. And sometimes again, naming methodology is part of governance. It should be part of your data governance package methodology that you have for your business, that you have for your org. And part of that methodology should include some standards, should include some naming standards about whether or not you use underscores to split up your words within your tables and your field names, or you use we used to call it camel case, where you use just uppercase to indicate the first letter of each word. Um, Most of my career, probably 90% of my career, I've uh, been in orgs where our standards were underscores. Um, but there are some orgs that do the proper case or the camel case. So in some cases, you'll see TBL at the end of a table. In some cases, you'll see the TBL at the beginning. Um, Generally, for when you create views, you'll see the VW at the beginning. So we'll use TBL at the end. We're gonna again open up our parentheses, and we're gonna start typing in. We have two fields in this case that we're gonna create for this table. We're gonna create our customer ID. Again, I like underscores. I like the capitalize IND. So the customer ID is gonna be our primary key. So and this is gonna be an integer. So we see that it's integer there. We want it to be integer here. We're gonna say not null because we don't want that to be null, right? That's gonna be our primary key. And then we want our customer name. Again, we'll use underscores. Important to be consistent. And this is going to be a variable character or an n variable character. So there's a couple. There's an n varchar and there's a varchar. N varchar allows things like the accents in a lot of Spanish words have accents in them, or all the Japanese characters to come through, things like that. So if you are if you're not just like if you're a global company, NVARCAR especially for customer names is probably going to be important, because you may have those characters come through as Japanese characters, as with accents in them. There's a lot of different characters that we use. So NVARCAR, and again, we want to kind of match the length of what's coming through in staging. So, in this case, we have our customer name coming through as, I think, 250. Yep. And that's how we create the table. So it's as simple as that. Now, not anything super complex here. We could run these two things. You'll notice that I highlighted those two. When you do that, when you highlight a code snippet in SSMS or in Azure Data Studio, it will, and you hit the run button or you hit F5 on your keyboard. Obviously, first I have to create the schema, but it will run just that snippet of code. Again, F5 is the shortcut key, and it's created that table for me and that schema. So next thing that I want to do, I want to move the data from that big table into this customer table that we just created, right? And so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to say insert into, and I'm just going to copy and paste this because I'm lazy. Copy and paste this down here. Insert into. Now, a couple things here. When you insert into, it's a good habit to be in to define the fields that you're inserting into, right? It's just a good habit. It's good for readability, especially if you're putting this into a stored procedure, or if we're going to copy and paste this, for example, into like a SQL piece within a pipeline, making sure that you're really defining out what is happening will first of all help your readability of your code, and second of all, it will help down the line when somebody else comes back in behind you and has to make changes. And then also, if a new field gets added to this, it's not going to break your code, right? So again, if a new somebody comes in and adds a new field to that customer table, if you've clearly defined the fields here, then it will keep your code from breaking down the line. And then they could go in and, as they get to that part of updating their production environment, then they can get to that part and um, add that field to your insert into statement and go on with life that way, as opposed to having to do it immediately when they've added it to the table or everything else is going to break. So again, customer ID and customer name. You'll notice that there's kind of an auto fill there. So customer ID, customer name. Now, in this case, we're selecting data from another table to put into this table. Alternatively, if you have specific values that you're adding to the table, then you could type values here. But here, we're going to actually select fields from the that one big table. But this is going to be the key. You do this one of two ways. Again, with Microsoft, and with SQL, there's a 10 million ways to do anything. But we are going to select distinct, the customer ID, and the customer name from our staging table. And again, I'm lazy, so I'm going to copy and paste it. Now, I like everything linear, so we're going to just break things up like that. So here's the thing. I'll show you real quick. Oops. Those are not the names of the table fields in that table. I don't have the underscores. There we go. So here we'll see that there are only 7 distinct records here. But this way it keeps you from having all the duplicates, right? That may be something that you may have ran into when you were creating your your dimensions, making sure that you do a select distinct, or you could do a group by, right? Either way, you would get the same result. I'm going to show you here real quick. So that's that, right? And this is with the group by. Same result. It reordered it a little differently because I didn't put an order by clause in there. But whether you use the distinct or the group by, in this specific case, doesn't matter. Don't get in the habit of just putting a distinct in everywhere. Group by is probably the better habit to be in. So we'll use the group by, but know that either way it gives you the same result. And we're going to insert that into that table. We're going to run that. 7 rows were affected. And now when we look at this October Code Challenge customer table, we'll see our 7 records. Let's order by customer ID. Right? So we see our 7 records. So now we've got a problem here, right? We have Stark Industries in here 3 times, and we have Acme Corp in here twice. This is a real world thing that happens. You often have customer names that show up multiple times. In those cases, you could handle that one of 2 ways. Sometimes you have to create hierarchies, right, of your customers. And you could do that. You could create hierarchies of your customers and create a hierarchy table. This happens sometimes, and sometimes it's legit because Stark Industries may have 3 different locations, right? And Acme Corp may have 2 different locations, and each location is responsible for payment of whatever products or services that you're selling. So this could be okay. As long as you have a distinct customer ID here, that's a unique customer ID is what matters here. So this is one way that you could insert into. Now, you don't always want to insert into. So here's the thing with this is that when you're creating your incrementals, as you're putting data into here incrementally, um, you're going to want to either do a merge. If you have missed our merge video, be sure to go back and check that out. But you could write a merge statement that will update the existing records, insert the record if it's not already there, and it will even remove a record if it's not no longer part of the data set. Just depending on what your use case is, right? You don't necessarily have to do the remove piece if you don't have the whole data set in your staging table every time that you're comparing your target to your source from. So this is how you create that we've walked through how to create a schema, create a table. Again, we've created this customer table. So now, next step, we're going to create our product table, right? And so tonight we're just going to do product table. We're not going to split it up into product and then category. We're just going to do product table. So let's wipe these out here. We'll wipe this out. Let's do create table. October code challenge product. We'll call it product table. So we've got our product table. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the chat. But we're going to do a product ID. And we're going to say this is an int. We're going to do not null. We're going to say product name. And we're going to say var and varchar. And we're going to say product name is 150. We're going to say category ID. Again, I like the underscores, so we'll go back through here and put the underscores in. Category ID is an int again, and then category name is going to be varchar and 150. And again, that's it. Nothing real exciting there. Command should run pretty quickly. So, and I'll say that when you're using a Synapse database, so if you're using a SQL Synapse database, there's an additional step when you're creating tables. You say with, and you'll say like distribution. And so for staging tables, you'll generally use round robin for your distribution. And distribution is just the efficiency of, helps with the efficiency of when it's inserting data into the table. Or you could use a hash and hash use one of the fields in your table as the hash piece for the distribution. And then you could either use column store index or heap as your as the second piece of that. But since we are using an on-prem database, then that part's not important. But just keep that in mind when you're using a Synapse database, that you'll have to indicate your distribution method, both for efficiency and especially as you scale. So, okay, so we created that table. Now let's do the insert into, right? So we're going to insert into that table. Again, lazy. I'm going to copy and paste. We're going to define the fields that we want to paste into. again, up to you, right? I think my personal preference is that you detail out the fields that you're inserting into, regardless of if you're doing it all. Even if you're doing all the fields, again for scalability as that table grows, um, then you do you know if you then you could do things incrementally as you're updating your production environment. Um, as well as for readability. So, so I think it's important, but it's not necessary if you're doing everything. It's SQL Server is not going to require you to do this. Not for this part. Okay, so again, insert into. We have our fields, and then we're going to select again. We're going to say from your staging dot OBT sales data, and we want product ID, product name. Now, keep in mind that order matters here. You have to have it in the same order that you're inserting it into, or it's not going to insert it into the right fields in that destination table. Category ID and category name. And I mean, because of how the table's set up, it would probably error out, but or it would error out because you were trying to put strings into integer. It's not gonna work. But if you have multiple integer or text fields in there, then it's easy to potentially put something in the wrong place. So again, it's got to be in the same order as as the top part. Your select statement for your insert into has to be in the same order as your insert into columns. Again, goes back to readability of putting explicitly defining all the fields that you're doing the insert into, right? So just good habit to be in. Let's run this. Crap. What did I forget? Anybody want to tell me what I forgot? I give everybody a second while I truncate the table. So I'm going to truncate this table here in a second. I'll tell you what I forgot to do if nobody else pipes up. We're going to truncate that table. So truncate table, for those of you that don't know, really clears out the table. It clears out the table without any logging, without very much logging. And so so it's quicker than a delete statement if you're removing everything from a table, because there's not as much overhead. So semicolon, okay. I mean, definitely didn't add a semicolon. I could add that. Semicolon could be important. Anybody else? We got a few people on here. All right. So not distinct. Yeah. Well, no, not the where statement, but the we've got duplicates in here. I'll show you. It's easier to see when it's ordered. Look, there's duplicates in here because we're pulling from an invoice line item table. So we may have sold 1,000 laptops, so laptop might be in here 1,000 times. So we need our group by, right? So this has 100,000 rows, right? We see in the bottom right here, the original query without the group by had 100,000 rows. It's going to be significantly yet less. So this goes back to before you do your insert into, uh, test your select statement. Uh, Especially if you're working something on something at 11 o'clock at night and you've been up since 5 a.m. Be sure that you're testing your select statement. Now we've got one laptop. Um, now the categories are going to have some duplicates in them, right? Because there's several items of clothing um, in the products, right? We have jeans, t-shirts, jackets, sneakers, hats, but we only have one t-shirt, one jeans line, one jacket line, one sneaker line. So, so again, like I mentioned earlier with the customer, same thing with the products. You have to put the group by again or the distinct. Either one here works just fine. Um, as Gene mentioned, a semicolon is going to be important to is a good habit to be in as well. Um, so you put that in, and we're gonna get rid of that. Um, put that in again for readability, and in some cases it's going to be required. Depending on your SQL statement, it may be required. All right, so now we're going to run that. It's only going to have 25 records instead of 100,000. Um, so again, your number of records definitely is an indicator. Also, test your SQL statement before you test your select statement before you execute your query, um, and make sure that it's defined correctly. So we've created our product table, we've created our customer table. Now let's look at what's still left in here, right? Um, so we have our line item ID, our invoice ID, invoice date. We took care of the customer piece. We've got a region in here. Makes me wonder if the region, and sometimes, this is part of discovery. This is part of data exploration and discovery, right? You may find as you're creating your dimensions, oh crap, maybe I need region to be part of my customer table. I bet if we add region to this, let's look. Let's look at select distinct customer ID, customer name, and region from our staging table. See, that's why we had 3 Stark Industries. The ones, well, 2 of them are Asia. Again, goes back to data cleansing. But Acme Corp has in North America and Asia. Stark Industries also has in Africa. So that's some of the explanation as to why we have multiple. Again, goes back to my point about sometimes you'll have like a Walmart. You may have 50 different customers that are Walmart, and each of those Walmarts may be a different store because each of those stores are responsible for paying that bill for that product or service that they're purchasing from you. So it's legitimate to have multiple Walmarts. Just important to have when that happens that you create some type of hierarchy as well to indicate why that is. Make sure that you're putting addresses in there or store numbers, something to define why. So that's that. So let's look again at what else we have here. So region, we could probably put with the customer ID, with the customer table. And then the product data we've split out. We have our quantity, our unit price, and line total. So quantity, unit price, line total, line item ID, invoice ID, and invoice date is our fact table. That's what we have left. That's what we're going to have left for our fact table. So we're going to do a couple of different things here, right? We want to add that region back to the customer table. So we're going to use an alter statement. October code challenge customer, add region, varchar. Let's say 150 just for consistency's sake. Alter table, the name of the table, add your name of your column type, and null or not null if you obviously not null if you need to define it as not null. It'll be nullable by default. Is that not the name of my schema? Am I getting too tired? Octocode challenge. Octocode challenge. Oh, customer table. All right. So now that field's added. When you do it this way, it adds that field to the end of the table. So it adds that column to the end. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an update statement. We're going to update this table. And we're going to set the region equal region, say b.region, because we're going to say from October. We're going to call this alias. This is A, and we're going to say inner join. I'm going to say select distinct customer ID, comma region from our staging table. So what this is going to do, it's going to give us just the ID and the region, right? We're going to call this B. We're going to soup B. We're going to say on a.customer ID equals b.customer ID. We're going to come back here and put our underscore in between customer ID. So what this is going to do, it's going to update this table. It's going to set the region field to the region that it pulls from this query. And our table is going to be accurate and whole for those 7 records now. And I'll show you. That it actually did populate that. And you'll see our region. So that's how you do an update. Now, the second thing we need to do is create our fact table. So we're going to create table. We're going to say October code challenge dot invoice fact. So I see this a lot, FCT, to stand for fact. Not to be confused with function, right? FNC, you'll see as an abbreviation for function, FCT for fact. And let's create our fields. So we have our line item ID as an int. We have our invoice ID as an int. We have our invoice date as a date, time. We'll call it date time. Then we'll want to still have our customer ID, right? Because we'll need that to relate back to our customer table. We'll still need our product ID, again, because we need that to relate back to our product table. What we don't need is our category ID, because the category ID is part of that product in that table. Then we don't need any of the names, right? We don't need the customer name, don't need product name, don't need category name. We do need the quantity. Obviously, we need to define our data types. Quantity is going to be decimal, 10,2. Oh no, sorry. Quantity is going to be int. Unit price and line total are going to be decimal, 10,2. Okay. I think that's everything. So really slim. The point of this here, is that fact tables are often a bunch of IDs, some units, some type of quantity, oftentimes, especially for invoice facts. And then your unit price, and sometimes it'll have your line total. Sometimes it won't. Depending on the situation, there may be, taxes, things like that. But in this case, this is what we've got. We're going to run that very quickly, executed. Now, for invoice lines, we're gonna do a group by and a distinct, just to ensure that we don't have. We'll do either a group by or the distinct to ensure that we don't have duplicates in here, right? It's important, even if you think that things are unique right now, in your source, there's no guarantee that that's always going to be the case. So it's a good habit to be in. Initial load to be for initial loads, especially to make sure that you understand your data set enough to know, do I need to use a group by or distinct, or if you're going to be confident, be real confident that there aren't any duplicates in there. So insert into. Again, our October code challenge invoice fact. And again, I'd define out the columns. I'm going to copy and paste it, but honestly, it's not going to make it a whole lot shorter because I still have to get rid of all this stuff. A little bit shorter, maybe. And then we're going to select from our staging I will copy and paste this. And we'll drop out customer name and region, all that. Group by this. Order by our line item ID. And then our invoice ID. Let's check our select statement. Things look good. Okay. Run our insert into. 100,000 rows affected. And that's in there. That's that. So now we split things up into our different dimensions, into our different groupings, and and have our model set up. And hopefully you followed along and you know, okay, this is how that model relates to the different tables. And you know how to make sure that you don't have duplicates. Now, as you're doing your aggregations, you know, I'll say that we've run an hour and 15 minutes, so it's getting a little late. But I want to be respectful of your all's time too. So if if you need to drop off, feel free to do that. If you're up for staying on, then I'll uh, hang out. And if you have any questions, um, then let me know. If and if you have any suggestions on, if you want to, I'm gonna walk through real quickly how to. My subscription should have went ahead and migrated. And walk through real quickly how to. Man, where's it at? There it is. Let's see if I could get into this now. Close it. Open it. I may have really screwed it up when I moved it. Nope, that was it. Okay, so I'm going to walk through how to move this in, how to move that data from a ADLS container into your SQL server using a pipeline, and how to set that up so that when you have incremental loads, then it's doing an upsert into that table. While I'm doing that, for those of you that are on, if you want to provide a SQL script of how to aggregate that data, now that you know how we have split it out into different dimensions, then pop your query in the comments and I'll use it and we'll test it, and I'll walk through any feedback that I may have for it. So in the meantime, let's look at, yes, all my link services are still here. So like I've created this, for those of you that didn't get a chance to watch that dynamics link services and dataset tutorial that I did, it was kind of long. It was like 40 minutes, because I did go through this really in detail, in depth, how to set this up, what link services are, what data sets are, as it relates to Synapse and ADF, and how to set up these parameters so that you have very dynamic link services and data sets that you could reuse. So again, be sure to check that out if that's something you're interested in and don't know how to do. Again, even down to providing the your secret name for your password, right? Having that parameter set. So let me test this connection here. I don't remember what my secret name is. There we go. Okay. This, you'll see it takes a second, but it'll come up here in a second and say that the connection failed because I put something in wrong. Probably the name of my database. I always get it backwards. Yeah. Should come up good this time. Nope. No. Ah, it's not done provisioning. Okay. So it's not done provisioning from where I migrated, from where I tried to move it back. Um, okay. So do that next time. So are y'all up for going through some aggregations, or do you want to skip to something else? Do y'all have any other questions? I'm happy to. I know we've spent a lot of time on this, and I appreciate everybody being on tonight. Thanks. Thanks for jumping on with me. All right. Well, I'll let y'all go. Thank you again for jumping on tonight. Appreciate you sticking with me, and hope you got something out of it. And again, always up for feedback and comments, and any suggestions on different content that we could do as we go forward. But next week, um, we'll probably talk maybe a little bit more about governance and setting up standards and what that might look like. And again, thank you for jumping on. And I'll also start writing up and getting out the November code review. But have a good evening, have a great week, and I'll talk to you all again next week. Thanks, guys.